Hello, fellow risk takers, and welcome to my worst investment ever. Stories of loss to keep you winning. In our community, we know that to win in investing, you must take risk, but to win big, you've got to reduce it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm on a mission to help 1 million people reduce risk in their lives. To reduce risk in your life, go to myworstinvestmentever.com today and take the risk reduction assessment I created from the lessons I've learned from more than 500 guests. Fellow risk takers, this is your worst podcast host, Andrew Stotz from Stotz Academy, and I'm here with featured guest Michelle Hahn. Michelle, are you ready to join the mission?
Yes, I am, Andrew.
I'm excited to have you on, and let me tell the audience about you. Michelle is author of The Chill Mom, founder and business coach for moms at MomBoss Academy. She was named by Zine as one of the top 10 mommy influencers in the world. And she's been featured regularly on Channel News Asia, The Asian Entrepreneurs, Lifetime Asia, Asian Money Guide, Smart Parents, and many other publications. Michelle, take a minute and tell us about the value that you bring to this wonderful world.
Hi, thank you, Andrew. Thanks for that amazing question. I like to think that the value that I bring to the world is showing people that they could do anything that they want to do. It's just that.
Wow.
It doesn't have to be, because it's not, how to say, like, whatever you want to achieve in life, it doesn't have to be bound by your background, where you come from, or even your external circumstances. It all comes from within. And if you set a goal, you can achieve it.
Let's talk about that for a moment, because why is it that people don't think that way naturally?
I think it's just a lot of fear. People don't want to be, people are worried how would people see them, like, the fear of judgment from others, which is normal.
Yep.
Right? It's normal for us to judge people and get judgment. But at the end of the day, what I've learned is that it doesn't matter. Who cares? Who cares what other things? Just do it, right? Are you going to live your life being bound by the judgment of others, or are you just gonna give it a go? And at the end of the day, as morbid as it may sound, we're all gonna leave this world. And what are you going to do with this one precious life of yours?
That's a challenge for the whole audience, to think about. I was just thinking as you were talking, like, I've been in this Facebook group of my high school friends, and I wasn't popular in high school, and I was into drugs, I was in alcohol, I was into trouble. And then I faded out. I went through rehab in my final year of high school, so people didn't really even know what happened to me. So they're kind of surprised to find me back alive. And now, all of a sudden, I have a big story to tell, and I realized that all the people I thought were so cool, many of them have crashed and done all kinds of, disastrous things. Mm-hmm. And here I am, standing, and then you made me think, like, did it really matter that I was so worked up at some point in my senior year that so-and-so didn't like me, or that this didn't, what? It means nothing. And I left high school, and I left treatment, rehab, and I've been sober for 40 years. And I left, and I just went on a journey to California, and then to Thailand, and then to build a career, and just to build my own business and do everything that I wanted to do. And what I also thought about when you said that was, I was in Hong Kong, and I was speaking, and some students came up to me and they said, I have an accounting, I studied accounting, and I want to work in finance, but I heard it's hard to, transition from accounting to art. And I said, you heard from who? Oh, I don't know. Somebody said. So you're going to let your life be run by what somebody said?
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. And look how far you've come. Right? If you were bound by where you were, how uncool you were, and the drugs and all that, good on you for moving past that and really do what you do best right now, Andrew. So proud of you, and thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, that's a pretty. It's in you. You bring me back. Now, before we get into the big question, can you just tell the audience, like, for people that like what you stand for, what you've talked about, and what you talk about here, what's the best way for them to, get more of you?
Do you mean how they could find me? Where else they
Yeah,
could? All
where
right.
can they
Yeah. So
find you?
I'm most active on Instagram. So you can find me at the Chill Mom with a MOM. And yeah, so I talked about I think I like, yeah, I do show all aspects of my life. I have started as a blogger, so you can see, my daily life as a mom, how I take care of myself, beauty, health routine, and also, of course, now entrepreneurship, and really just living my best life. I think a lot of people use that word, and I feel like it's overused sometimes. I'm just living my life to my best ability. That's
There it
all.
is. I think we all want to get there. So in Instagram, we'll have the link for that as well as all the
Thank
other
you.
links in the show notes. Well, now it's time to share your worst investment ever. And since no one goes into their worst investment thinking it will be, tell us a bit about the circumstance leading up to it, then tell us your story.
All right, so my worst investment ever. I've always wanted to be a business owner. Obviously with no experience as well. So what happened was I've always been, well, not a business owner. I started working when I was 16 years old. I did not come from a well-to-do family, so I had to support myself and support my family at one point as well at 16 years old. I've always been working for myself. At 16, I started modeling until I was 24, and I realized that that's not something that I can continue doing. I want to grow, and I know that I can't be a model forever. So then I moved to Australia and kind of like started to study again, and I got into the whole corporate world, working for other people, and I realized that I've always had my own idea, but in the corporate world, I bring things up to upper management, and they're always, that's too hard to implement, blah blah blah. That's great idea, but push back. And I'm like, okay, I want to do my own thing. And I was into kind of like more wholesome, healthy food at that point. And this is back in 2010, and that's not really. I think it's a slightly ahead of its time in Singapore anyway. But I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start my own soup and salad bar. And I believe I'm not the only one, that you want your own cafe, you want your own restaurant for people to hang out at, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do that, right? This is my idea. Like I think it was a great idea. Obviously it wasn't. I spent almost a whole year researching with this thick of a business plan, right? Go ahead, renovated the place, with the formulated the recipe and everything. Spent more than half of my life saving at that point, right? Because I started working at 16, so 30 years old I started that. So like more than half my life savings gone into that. And within the first month of business, I know it's not going to work. It's just not. It's a bad
Can
location.
you remember the moment that you kind of realized, like that day or that morning or that whenever, that the hope and excitement turned into
Yeah, I do. It's probably like by the second or third week, as I do the math, it's like, this is not going to turn. Like we've tried the first week, you're still excited. Oh,
yeah,
opening, there's still people visiting you, your friends will come, go out of the way and come. And then the second day, it's like, oh, it's still good. It's like, okay, maybe people just don't know about us yet. We try everything, flyers, this, that, right? Let's do delivery as well. But yeah, by the third, second, third week, it's like, okay, these are my costs.
and how did you feel at that time?
I don't know, like it's just physically, like when people talk about heart pain, like your heartache, I could feel it physically. Like it's aching. I think maybe 5, 6 years afterwards, after that failure, it still ache every time I think about it. But now I think now that I come out of it and have built something else, I see that as a lesson and a story that I can now share. So it hurts a bit less.
Well, let's go through the lessons that you learned. How would you describe them?
Yeah, so for me, it's like I was so into my point of view, right? I want to do this. This is something that I would want, right? I'm starting that business for myself, and I did not consider would like anyone else want that, especially in that location. We were, and also because I was trying to, oh, let's scheme on because well, property in Singapore is expensive and rent is expensive, so let's not go into the CBD and let's just be in the city fringe. We get a bit of traffic, lunch traffic, but nighttime, weekends, dead, absolutely dead. And also, we also did not consider there are cheaper food option around us. And because we're making everything wholesome and our food cost was really high. Right. And yeah, I would say that I just did not do enough market research. And I was building that business for myself, for my own ego.
Right.
And I did not listen to perhaps other people's opinion or someone who's more experienced in the whole F&B space and to get feedback from them before I went into it. But what happened was that it did not all go to waste. Well, I did wasted the money on the whole decked out interior and all, but the original idea, what I did was I had to swallow my pride and like, okay, this won't be a cafe, right? It won't be like my own space, my friend get to chill and coffee and things like that. I had to downsize and move into a food court.
Right.
So it's not like entirely like go to zero. I just still had retained some parts of it, moved into a food court, and although the rent was 2.5 times more than what I was paying, it was profitable from day one.
Because the people were there.
Because the people were there and they had a system. It was a bit dull, you move into a food court in Singapore, like your photos and everything else has to look standard as the other stalls. It's a bit like,
Line up.
oh my God, you're taking my creativity out of here, and it's like, oh, my food looks like we have to use the same utensils. But hey, who cares about like what I think, how unique the branding is? Are there enough people? Like people who run this food court, they know their business, they know what works. So the big lesson that I learned here is that, hey, listen to systems and frameworks that of successful people or successful businesses. They've already got that. Use that instead of staying in my ego and say I want to do things a certain way. So that was my worst investment in, how did I say, like the worst judgment that I could have made. Yeah.
And what ended up happening with the food court situation?
Yeah,
Is it
so
still
we were
going?
doing well for 2 years. And then we expanded to another food court and was doing well as well. And then motherhood happened.
Uh-oh.
So I was okay with, working 13 hours day F&B. In Singapore, the staff turnover is also very high. So I'm okay some days being there. But then when my baby came, it's like, do I want to put this child into a baby care center while I work 13 hours a day, or do I want to be there for her? And I'm originally from Malaysia and my husband is from Australia, so we do not have any family support here. So it's either a helper at home or baby care center, and I continue to work hard, and I'm like, okay, so as the leads were coming up, I'm like, I can always go back to that if I want to, but right now I want to be there for my baby. So yeah, I just basically gave up the business to be a stay-at-home mom.
Yep. All right. Well, maybe I'll summarize some of my takeaways. Some of the things that I was writing down stuff as you were speaking. The first thing that you mentioned that made me really think is you were saying how that your big bosses would always say too hard to implement. And then you ended your whole time talking about systems and frameworks. Right? And part of what makes something be able to be implemented is having systems and frameworks so that it can be implemented and replicated. So it's like you came full circle.
Yeah.
And that's pretty interesting. The other thing that I wrote down was like, I looked at it from my point of view. And I think for all the listeners, Michael Gerber talks about it in his book, The E-Myth. He calls it the entrepreneurial seizure. You get so excited about your idea, nothing can stop you.
Yep.
And I can't tell you the number of people that come to me because I've started up businesses and they say, you know, I want to hear your advice. And then they don't want to hear my advice. Or they're not listening to my advice. So I always make a point of saying to someone, when they've told me their whole story, okay, tell me your story, okay, and then I'll think about it. And then I ask them, so are you here to tell me your story or are you here to get my advice? And I make them acknowledge that they're asking me for my advice or not.
Yeah.
And so like I had a friend of mine that was he and his wife are older, they don't have a lot of money, and they saw this opportunity on the internet to do Forex trading. Now, from my experience, about 95.73748% of the time, Forex trading on the internet is a scam. And so they kept telling me about how they want to do it. And are you asking me for my, because the husband kept saying, ask Andrew for his advice. But then the wife said, so we're going to do this. And I was like, okay, you're not asking me for my advice, so I'm not giving it.
They're just looking for your validation that their thoughts is correct.
Right. And they didn't get it from me. And then they invited me to go to some event. And I said, no, thanks. But anyways, it just made me, there's a lot that I was thinking about. But I also wrote the idea of all in. When you start a business, ultimately you do have to kind of go all in. If you start it like absolute bare bones, maybe nobody's going to come, so like it's a tough decision. And, you got to build it out. I do like one of my friends back in America where my sister lives in Salem, Massachusetts. He has a coffee shop, and it is the most simplest coffee shop I've ever seen. Sweep the floors, simple chairs, there's an espresso machine, there's some milk, and later he added sandwiches. But, I mean, he made it the most simplest business. Yeah. And, in that sense, he went all in on simplicity. And the last thing is, I just want to highlight the idea of systems and frameworks because I'm an analyst and I'm into systems and frameworks. In fact, for investing, and we do a lot of management of people's money, and we use systems and frameworks.
Yeah.
And I never, ever make ad hoc decisions. Like, oh my God, this is happening in the markets and I'm going to sell this and buy that. Whereas that's what I think a lot of young people think, and maybe what I thought when I was young, is what makes you great in the markets. No, it's about relying on your systems and frameworks. And so for the audience out there, I think it's really, really great reminder. Anything you would add to my takeaways?
Yeah, definitely. And I think people don't like to think, the younger me, we didn't like to think of system and framework because it's boring. And people don't talk about that because it's boring. Is what needed to be done. Oh, it doesn't sound sexy, right? But whereas passion and purpose and how we're going to change the world, that sounds more exciting. So I think more people talk about that, especially for entrepreneurs or even successful ones. They talk about how the original idea, or media tend to cover that side of the story more than how they built the framework and how they built that system to support them to get to where they are today.
So don't be seduced by all the, ideas and all
stories,
that.
Right?
Well, and the point is that the reason why systems and frameworks are so critical is because in order to build a really successful business, you have to scale. And that means you have to replicate your product or service thousands, if not millions of times. And you can't do that successfully without good systems and frameworks. Now, based upon what you learned from this story and what you continue to learn, what one action would you recommend our listeners take to avoid suffering the same fate? They're out there right now. They're looking for a location for that amazing shop or bakery or whatever. They're really excited. Michelle, they need to hear from you. What's that one thing that they should do?
I wish if I could go back in time is to really slow down and find who have done this before and ask them what have they put in place, what was important in their journey that have gotten them to where they are today, and really just swallow that humble pie and just ask for help, because I did not ask for help. I felt like I could do this myself. So yeah, that's the number one thing that I wish I had done.
Ask for help from an expert, ladies and gentlemen. great advice, and this is a great way that you can reduce your risk. And as I always tell people, whenever you are asking for someone's help or opinion, the best thing to do is make sure you have paper and pencil with you and write down what they say, because it is very, very difficult to speak and write at the same time, which basically means it forces you to listen. All right, what is a resource that either you've developed or you've used that you'd recommend for our listeners?
A resource, I find that since after the many lives I had, closing out my business, become a mommy blogger, become a business owner, and now teaching other people, is the number one resources that is available to all of us is ourselves, is our own personal branding. Who are you? What do you stand for? And your good name. What does it represent? And that's one resource that you could tap into and then put out there in the world. Don't be afraid to show the world what you've got to offer. And that's why I love the first question that you asked me. What's the value that you think you can bring into the world? I have not thought about it, like asked myself that way, but I've always believed that each of us has a good name that we can put out in the world. Like the internet and everything now is free. Like for yourself, you started this podcast. It's free to start, essentially. And so do that, right? That's the resource that all of us have, and that it will be valuable for everyone to tap into in a way.
Yeah, and the great thing about it is you don't have to read a lot of marketing books to come up with some original thing, because your story, your value is original.
Absolutely.
Before I ask you the last question, I'll just share a little story. Since you're mom boss, and since you've had a lot of experience in this way, I want to tell a good story about motherhood. And that is that I went through a lot of hard times when I was young with drug addiction, as I had mentioned, but my mom and dad both, they never gave up on me. And I always say to people, never give up, because kids can be into a lot of trouble, but things can change. Somebody can come along in their life. Maybe it's not, oftentimes not the parents that are the ones, but sometimes it is. My parents never gave up on me, and they supported me as I got sober and spent the world, life traveling the world and working and building up my career. And they were always there for me. And my father passed away about 6 years ago, and my mother had had a stroke. And basically at 78, she asked me, could you take care of me in Thailand? And we had a discussion between her and myself and my sister. And absolutely. So it's been 6 years now that my mother's been living with me in Thailand. And I can tell you that it's been, a challenging 6 years, both for her and for me. There's full of emotional and physical challenges, but the relationship that we've built in the last 6 years has taken us to the stratosphere as far as connecting to each other. And so, a lot of times when we think about motherhood, we think about that time when we're young and, you're taking care of a kid, or a kid's being taken care of by mom or dad. But I just want to inspire all those people listening that think about what your parents did for you and make sure that you're delivering that back to them. And when you do that, as a friend of mine, when I asked a friend of mine for advice who had done the same in Thailand with his mother, he said, it's going to be hard as hell. But he said, my mother passed away 10 years ago, but I don't regret one moment of it. It's something that it's an action you can take in your life that you will never regret. And that's my little story about my mom. She and I just had our coffee this morning, and she just went out for lunch with one of the ladies that takes care of her. So that's my little story.
Yeah, definitely. Families always comes first, and that's why I had no regrets for giving up my business to be a stay-at-home mom. And if I had not done that, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. So you never know where one thing would lead you to another. So, besides my story and how horrible it went down, I do want people who has a dream to start their own business and just do go for it, but with caution, and get the advice that you need.
Yep. So last question, what is your number one goal for the next 12 months?
My number one goal now that the world is opening up again, and I would love to take my family on a holiday. That's it. I've been
Seems
wanting
like
to
a
do
normal
that.
thing, but yeah, in this
It
weird
is very
world.
normal. Correct, yeah, but we haven't been able to do that for the past 2 years. So this year, I want to take them on like a long, all expense paid by me holiday. Yeah, to Japan or Europe, wherever that we can have a consensus with on like where to go. And my kids are finally old enough; they're like 8, 10, and 6. Because when they're any younger, it's a bit hard, right? So now that we could actually show them how people at the other side of the world lives, and the culture and everything like that.
Exciting. Well, we look forward to watching that on Instagram and your other places. Well,
Yeah.
listeners, there you have it. Another story of loss to keep you winning. If you haven't yet taken the risk reduction assessment, I challenge you to go to myworstinvestmentever.com right now and start building wealth the easy way by reducing risk. As we conclude, Michelle, I want to thank you again for joining our mission. And on behalf of A. Stotz Academy, I hereby award you alumni status for turning your worst investment ever into your best teaching moment. Do you have any parting words for the audience?
My parting word is just go for it. I know you hear of like worst investment ever story over here, but just go for it. I mean, we have that one sweet life. Whatever you want to do, just go for it. You never know where it will take you.
Beautiful advice. And that's a wrap on another great story to help us create, grow, and protect our wealth. Fellow risk takers, today we expanded our mission to help 1 million people reduce risk in their lives. This is your Worst Podcast host, Andrew Stotz, saying, I'll see you on the upside.